It's the year 4 AD, and Emperor Augustus has again sent his newly adopted son Tiberius with other great military commanders to conquer neighboring Germanic tribes. The campaign went well for 2 years, but while fighting in the north, more troubles were brewing in the east, within the borders of the empire. This conflict, commonly known as the Great Illyrian Revolt, would become the biggest threat to the Roman state since Hannibal and the Second Punic War. The process of the revolt is at length mentioned by two sources, Velleius Paterculus and Cassius Dio. While a big part of their writing overlap well, there are some disparities, meaning it's impossible today to reconstruct these events with complete certainty. The causes for the uprising were similar to those during the time of great conquests in the Republic era. The Romans had been ruthless in their tax collecting to the point where it closely resembled plundering of the local populations. Additionally, the people didn't take lightly the forced recruitment of their young men into the Roman war against the Germanic tribes up north. Such recruitment, that was usually an effective mechanism to prevent revolts, would now backfire. Both sources agree that the revolt began in the central Illyricum among the tribe of Daesitiates, led by their chieftain Bato. While the Romans were recruiting the local young men, they became aware of their strength and, instead of joining the Roman officers, killed them and with it inspired more and more of their comrades. These were capable warriors, trained by Romans to fight in their armies. Some of them were even commanders that fought under Romans beforehand. And now they would provide the rebellions with a fighting force that knew Roman language and tactics. Bato was later joined by the Pannonian tribe of Breuci, under the commander Spines and another Bato, along with many other tribes. Because of these war chieftains, the revolt is also known as the War of the Batos. According to Velleius, the rebels now counted 800,000 members, of which 200,000 were infantry and 9,000 cavalry. These numbers are most likely inflated, with the number of infantry counting 100,000 at best. These soldiers would then separate into three directions. One would march into Italy through now Portus and Tergest, the second would march into Macedonia, while the third would stay to defend their own territory. Despite their numbers and planning, the rebels didn't achieve a breakthrough in the first year of the war, mostly due to miscoordination. Breuci went to siege the city of Sirmium, but were defeated by the Roman force from Moesia, led by General Aulus Caecina Severus, who pursued the Breuci all the way to the Drava river. The Daesitiates, who besieged Salona, were also defeated and their commander severely wounded. They then had to satisfy themselves by raiding along the Adriatic coast, taking parts of the province of Macedonia and defeating a Roman army near Apollonia. Meanwhile, Emperor Augustus raised concern that the enemy army would soon appear before Rome, and ordered a new army to be assembled with the help of senators, veteran citizens, and freedmen. The supreme command was given to his adopted son, future Emperor Tiberius. What prevented the rebels from marching into Italy was a Roman officer, Marcus Valerius Messallinus, whom Tiberius sent with half of the 20th legion. The Roman army prevailed even after falling into an ambush. The plan to march on Rome was then abandoned, and the armies of Breuci and Daesitiates finally joined forces and took position on the Mount Almus for the second attack on Sirmium. Despite their combined armies, the battle ended in a very similar way to the first attack on the city. The rebels were met with Muisin Roman force sent by General Aulus Caecina Severus, along with Thracian cavalry led by their prince Rhoemetalcus, who defeated them. Severus was unable to rout the enemy completely though, and had to return to Moesia due to the pressing threat of Dacians and Sarmatians. After that, Tiberius and Messallinus tarried around Siscia, while the rebels stayed on the move, recruiting more and more to their cause and causing devastation in the process. Winter came, and the rebels once more tried to invade Macedonia, but were once more stopped by Rhoemetalcus. Until spring came, the rebels would send out raiding parties from their hill fortresses, but there would be no big engagement against the Romans. In the second year, the war wouldn't reach any conclusive stage either. Augustus sent new military attachments under the command of Tiberius's nephew Germanicus. Severus also returned with 3 legions from Moesia, along with another officer, Silvanus Plautius, who brought 2 legions from Anatolia. Combined forces from both sides clashed at the Volcaean marshes, where the Romans once more achieved a costly victory. Around this time, the exact orders of battle is unclear. The same army, joined by Rhoemetalces and his forces, achieved another costly but heroic victory at Mount Claudius near Siscia. The rebels managed to surround and began to rout the Roman army, but the Roman legions regained their composure and managed to break the enemy line, inspired more so by the soldiers themselves than by commanding officers. In order to then overrun many parts of the region at once, the Romans divided into smaller detachments, but for a time these achieved nothing worthy of note, aside from Germanicus, who defeated a Dalmatian tribe of Mysae. In the winter, the rebels began to be plagued by famine and disease, and some of them tried to parley with Romans encamped at Siscia, who then commanded a large army of 120,000 soldiers combined. But they eventually dispersed, some returning to Moesia and some protected Sirmium in the east. In the next year, August 3rd, 8 AD, the Pannonian Breuci surrendered and dropped their weapons at the river Bathinus. Bato, turning himself in and betraying his co-leader Pinus, was allowed to keep his position as the chieftain of Breuci. This also caused a breakdown of the revolt, but not for long, for the Bato of the Daesitiates managed to ambush his namesake and execute him, which poured fresh fuel on the revolt. Throughout the rest of the year, Silvanus Plautius managed to defeat the Breuci and chased after Bato of the Daesitiates, who retreated into Dalmatia, raiding as they went. Most other Pannonian tribes also submitted to Silvanus, leaving only small groups to continue the fight. In the year 9 AD, the Romans continued to push into Dalmatia. They occupied multiple fortresses, Tiberius commanding troops marching from Siscia and Sirmium and Germanicus attacking from the Adriatic coast. Despite the Roman successes, the Illyrians continued to resist. At this point, famine and plague appeared in Rome, in part because of the war, and Emperor Augustus sent Tiberius again into Illyricum to crush the revolt once and for all. Tiberius separated his army into 3 detachments, one he assigned to Silvanus and one to Marcus Lepidus, and with the rest he marched with Germanicus against Bato. The first 2 commanders easily overcame their opponents in battle, but Tiberius had to wander basically over the whole region, as Bato marched from place to place, evading his pursuers. Tiberius and Germanicus finally surrounded him at the well-protected position in Andetrium. While besieged, Bato sent out raiding parties, preventing supplies and communication from reaching the Roman army. In the way, the Romans turned from being a besieging army into a besieged one. Despite the unfavorable terrain, Tiberius managed to defeat the opposing army with his superior numbers in an intense battle. Tiberius stayed to oversee the terms of those that surrendered, while Germanicus was sent to crush the last pockets of rebellion. He besieged another stronghold of Arduba, of which armies and inhabitants came into conflict during the siege, having to choose between their lives and freedom. It is especially during this last phase of the war where sources mention almost genocidal behavior of the Roman army, slaughtering escaping enemies like wild animals, while in the Battle of Arduba, women threw their children in fires and ended their own lives in fear of the Roman conquest and enslavement. Due to the ensuing internal conflict within the fort between the locals and soldiers, Germanicus was able to take the fort, and other nearby places also sued for peace. In the meantime, Bato of the Daesitiates also surrendered himself to Tiberius. Thus, the Great Illyrian Revolt ended with a decisive Roman victory. As a consequence of the revolt, the Roman state expanded its borders in Pannonia and reaffirmed its domination in the already conquered territories. The subjugated people of Illyricum wouldn't rise again during the reign of Augustus, and under his rule, the province of Illyricum would be divided into Upper and Lower Illyricum. These would eventually become 2 separate provinces of Dalmatia and Pannonia. Because of the revolt in Illyricum, war plans against the Germanic tribes in the north had to be cancelled and Roman military presence there reduced, as units were redirected south. Despite the great many peoples involved and lives lost, the Roman victory in Illyricum is today overshadowed by the famous defeat at the Teutoburg forest against the Germanic tribes, which happened just 5 days after victory in Illyricum. As a result, there was no time for celebrations and triumphs. After quickly finishing business in Illyricum, Tiberius was sent with his legions back north to Germania, where the fight would continue. This was not the first time Augustus fought against Celts and Illyrians in the region. If you want to learn more about how he was wounded in Illyricum back when he was still named Octavius, click on the next video or link in the description where you can find more information. Be sure to like, subscribe, you know how YouTube works, and I'll be back with more history soon.